Bruce Lee, and then Jean-Claude Van Damme, and then who? After Jean-Claude Van Damme, who is the next? Nobody.
For over 50 years, the world has been haunted by one burning question: what really killed Bruce Lee? His shocking death at just 32 sparked endless theories, from freak medical mishaps to wild conspiracies, yet the truth always seemed out of reach. But now, at 79, Bolo Yeung, the man who trained with Lee, fought beside him on screen, and knew him in ways the public never could, is finally breaking his silence. And what he reveals about Bruce Lee's final days is nothing like what the headlines have been telling us. Brothers in battle, Bruce Lee and Bolo Yeung's unbreakable bond. When people talk about Enter the Dragon, the focus usually falls on Bruce Lee, the unstoppable force who turned the movie into an instant classic. But behind the flying kicks and bone-crunching fights, there's another story. One that belongs to a man who stood right beside Lee, both on screen and off. That man is Yang Si, better known as Bolo Yeung. Most people remember him as the menacing sidekick to the film's villain. But what the world rarely saw was the real bond he shared with Bruce Lee. The kind of friendship that wasn't built on lights, cameras, and staged punches, but on respect, trust, and a shared love for martial arts. Bolo Yeung has always been a private person, someone who barely did media rounds. Yet in a rare 2022 interview, at 79, he peeled back the curtain on his time with Bruce. He described how life on the set of Enter the Dragon wasn't just rehearsed fight choreography. Bruce was constantly being tested. Extras and crew members would challenge him, desperate to prove themselves against the legend. Bolo recalled that Bruce never wanted to fight, but sometimes had no choice. One incident in particular still sticks with Yeung to this very day. During filming, an extra tried to test Bruce's Jeet Kune Do skills. It ended almost as quickly as it began. Bruce delivered a lightning-fast kick to the man's head, and the fight was over. Bruce was too fast, Bolo explained, his voice still carrying that mix of awe and respect decades later. He admitted that even after years of watching fighters, no one's speed compared to Lee's. Their friendship went deeper than just movie sets. The two first crossed paths in 1971 during a cigarette commercial, an ordinary job that ended up sparking an extraordinary friendship. By the following year, Bruce personally reached out to Bolo and invited him to join Enter the Dragon. It wasn't just about casting a tough-looking villain's henchman. Bruce wanted Bolo by his side, and that's exactly where he stayed. On screen, they clashed as enemies. Off-screen, they laughed, trained, and built a bond that would carry through decades. For Bolo, Enter the Dragon was never just another movie credit. It was the moment that cemented his place in history alongside his friend, the Little Dragon himself. Even now, when Bolo Yeung remembers Bruce Lee, he doesn't speak like a co-star rattling off memories of a colleague. He speaks with the warmth of a man who knew the real person behind the myth. The friend who was more than just fists of fury, but a human being with dreams, struggles, and a fire inside him that could never be put out. To truly understand why their bond mattered so much, you need to step back and see where Bruce Lee came from, the boy who would one day become the Little Dragon. The making of the Little Dragon. Bruce Lee's rise to legend. Bruce Lee wasn't born in Hong Kong, as many assume. He entered the world in San Francisco on November 27, 1940, while his parents were visiting the U.S. on an opera tour. His father, Lee Hoi Chun, was a Cantonese opera singer, while his mother, Grace Ho, came from a family with mixed roots, a background that would later play a complicated role in Bruce's life. Because he was born on American soil, Bruce had U.S. citizenship from day one. But just 4 months later, the family returned to Hong Kong. It wasn't the Hong Kong of neon lights and modern skylines. It was wartime Hong Kong, under Japanese occupation after the surprise attack in December 1941. Life was dangerous and uncertain, and hardship became part of Bruce's earliest memories. Out of that chaos, a fighter was born, literally. By the Chinese zodiac, Bruce arrived in both the hour and year of the dragon, which is why he would later be called Li Xiao Long, Little Dragon. Bruce was introduced to the stage before he could even walk. Thanks to his father's opera career, He landed his first film role as a baby in Golden Gate Girl. By the time he was a teenager, he had already appeared in about 20 films. Acting wasn't foreign to him, it was part of his DNA. But life wasn't just lights and cameras. At home, things were complicated. His father struggled with opium addiction, and Bruce often found himself caught between discipline and rebellion. By age 7, he was practicing Tai Chi with his father. By 9, he was starring alongside him in The Kid, his first leading role. But as he grew older, Bruce became restless, and that restlessness often got him into fights on the streets of Hong Kong. He wasn't just another kid scrapping in back alleys. He had skill, swagger, and a temper. In 1958, he even won Hong Kong's school boxing tournament, knocking out the reigning champion. That same year, just to prove he wasn't all fists and fury, he also became a cha-cha champion. Bruce was a paradox. Dancer, fighter, actor, always moving, always hungry for more. But there was one encounter that would change his path forever. In 1953, Bruce was introduced to the legendary Wing Chun master IP Man. At first, his mixed heritage caused friction. Traditionalists in the Kung Fu world didn't want non-Chinese students learning their art. Bruce was often shunned, but his determination was stronger than their prejudice. He trained privately with IP Man and a few close students, sharpening the skills that would one day shock the world. Despite his growing mastery, Bruce's street fights became a problem. One particularly brutal fight with the son of a triad member pushed his family to make a decision. At just 18, Bruce was sent back to the United States to claim his citizenship and start fresh. His mother told police she'd take responsibility for him if they let him go. But behind closed doors, she and his father knew Hong Kong couldn't contain him anymore. So in 1959, Bruce boarded a ship and sailed back to the land of his birth. He landed first in San Francisco before moving to Seattle, where he lived with family friends. His first job in America was average. He worked as a waiter at Ruby Chow's restaurant. But in Seattle, something big began to form. Bruce started teaching martial arts to friends, blending his Wing Chun training with his own ideas. He called it Jun Fan Gung Fu, literally Bruce Lee's Kung Fu. His classes looked nothing like traditional Chinese martial arts schools. Bruce welcomed anyone willing to learn, regardless of race or background. That alone made him a revolutionary. At a time when martial arts were often closed off to outsiders, Bruce was opening the doors wide. His students were a diverse mix, and through them, he began experimenting with concepts that would later evolve into Jeet Kune Do, the philosophy of adapting, flowing, and rejecting the rigid traditions that held fighters back. By 1961, Bruce enrolled at the University of Washington. Officially, his major was drama, but his real studies were philosophy, psychology, and the mechanics of fighting. He was broke, washing dishes to pay bills, yet he was also surrounded by wealthy friends who admired his charisma and discipline. Out of that odd mix of poverty, intellect, and raw ambition, Bruce started building the foundation of the man who would change martial arts forever. In 1964, Bruce dropped out of college and moved to Oakland, teaming up with James Yim Lee, a fellow martial artist. Together, they opened a second martial arts studio. That same year, Bruce appeared at the Long Beach International Karate Championships, where he stunned the audience with his 1-inch punch and 2-finger push-ups. The crowd had never seen anything like it. That single performance changed his life. Through Long Beach, Bruce met Ed Parker. He also crossed paths with Jun Rhee, the Taekwondo master who would later teach him the finer details of the sidekick. Bruce, in turn, shared with Rhee the secret of his non-telegraphic punch. These exchanges showed what made Bruce different. He wasn't a gatekeeper. He was a student as much as a teacher, always evolving, always questioning. But Bruce also courted controversy. He openly criticized traditional martial arts for being outdated, calling for modernization. That sparked anger among traditionalists and led to one of the most famous fights of his life, the showdown with Wong Jack Man in 1964. Accounts differ. Some say it lasted 3 minutes, others 25. But the takeaway was the same. Bruce wasn't satisfied. He felt the fight took too long, and that frustration pushed him to strip away the fluff and focus only on what worked. That moment was the birth of his new philosophy, an approach to fighting that was brutally effective, fluid, and practical. By then, Bruce wasn't thinking about movies anymore. His focus was on teaching, on perfecting his art. But fate had other plans. His Long Beach appearance caught the eye of Hollywood producer William Dozier, who invited him to audition for a TV pilot. The show never materialized, but the spark was lit. The boy from Hong Kong, the fighter from the streets, the philosopher from Seattle. He was about to become something bigger than anyone could have imagined. And through all of this, his struggles, his breakthroughs, his fights and philosophies, there was one thing that never wavered: the respect he earned from those who trained with him. For Bolo Yeung, that respect turned into a lifelong friendship. Because once you saw Bruce Lee up close, you never forgot him. Not the speed, not the charisma, and certainly not the man behind the myth. Love, passion, and scandal inside Bruce Lee's heart. For all his power, his philosophy, and the legend he became, Bruce Lee's anchor in life was always Linda. Long before Hollywood made him the Little Dragon, before Enter the Dragon turned him into a legend, Bruce was just a University of Washington student teaching martial arts on the side. That's where he met Linda Emery, a bright-eyed Garfield High School graduate training to become a teacher. She signed up for his kung fu class, not knowing she was stepping into the world of a man who would change her life forever. The two fell in love, and on August 17, 1964, they made it official. Linda stood by Bruce as his wife, his partner, and eventually the mother of his children. Together, they built a life that balanced fame with the intimacy of family. She was there through the grind of his early teaching years, the whirlwind of his rising stardom, and the shock of his sudden death in 1973. But Linda didn't let Bruce's story end with him. She took on the role of guardian of his legacy. She published his writings, protected his philosophies, and eventually helped establish the Bruce Lee Foundation, a non-profit dedicated to sharing his art and wisdom with the world. Even after remarrying twice, first to writer Tom Bleecker in 1988, then to stockbroker Bruce Cadwell in 1991, her life always circled back to the man who defined it. Today at 80, Linda remains a living bridge to Bruce, her devotion to his memory undimmed by time. Together, Bruce and Linda raised two children, Brandon and Shannon. Theirs was a close-knit family, full of love but also touched by tragedy. Brandon Lee, born February 1, 1965, was Bruce's only son. From the beginning, he carried both the blessing and the burden of being Bruce Lee's child. Acting and martial arts ran through his veins, and as he grew older, Hollywood came calling. Brandon carved his own path, starring in films like Kung Fu, The Movie, Showdown in Little Tokyo, and his breakout role, Rapid Fire. But it was The Crow in 1993 that was meant to cement his place as a star in his own right. Tragically, during filming, a prop gun misfired, killing him instantly. He was only 28. The eerie similarity to his father's early passing stunned the world, leaving fans with a sense of loss that still lingers today. Brandon was remembered not just as Bruce Lee's son, but as a gifted actor and martial artist who was just beginning to show the world who he truly was. Shannon Lee, born April 19, 1969, became the keeper of the flame. She pursued acting, appearing in films and TV shows, but her mission was bigger. Shannon took on the responsibility of preserving her father's philosophy and legacy, especially after losing her brother. Through the Bruce Lee Foundation, she promotes Jeet Kune Do and her father's teachings of self-expression, discipline, and personal growth. She also ventured into production, most notably as an executive producer of the 2019 series Warrior, a project based on Bruce's original idea. An actress, martial artist, singer, and businesswoman, Shannon embodies the spirit of the Lee family, versatile, resilient, and unafraid to carry on her father's name. The woman Bruce Lee had an affair with. Bruce Lee lived by speed, intensity, and fire. He wasn't just fast in the ring, he was fast in life, moving through everything with an urgency as if he knew time was not on his side. He married young, rose to fame quickly, and became a star almost overnight. But behind the fame and the image of discipline and philosophy, Bruce was also a man. Flawed, restless, and capable of choices that stirred scandal long after his death. One of those choices was an affair with a woman who would forever be linked to his final hours, actress Betty Ting Pei. At the time of his passing, Bruce was still married to Linda Lee Cadwell, the woman who had been by his side from his Seattle college days through the meteoric rise to international stardom. Linda had given him stability, children, and a partner in his pursuit of greatness. But Bruce, despite his devotion to family, found himself tangled in another kind of passion, one that was forbidden, reckless, and destined to explode into controversy. That woman was Betty Ting Pei. Betty Ting Pei wasn't a nobody. In the 1960s and 70s, she was a well-known Hong Kong actress, a regular face in the popular Shaw Brothers films. Free-spirited and unapologetically bold, she was the kind of woman who didn't blend into the background. Her relationship with Bruce wasn't just rumors in the dark. People knew. Within the tight-knit circles of Hong Kong cinema, it was an open secret. The dragon had a mistress, and her name was Betty. What made the affair unforgettable was not just the betrayal of Bruce's marriage, but the fact that Betty was there, literally there, when his story came to a shocking end. On July 20th, 1973, Bruce was at Betty's apartment. The two had spent time together before Bruce turned his attention back to work, discussing script changes with producer Raymond Chow. At some point, Bruce complained of a severe headache. Betty handed him one of her painkillers, a tablet of Equagesic, a mix of aspirin and tranquilizer. Bruce lay down in her bed to rest, and that was the last time he was seen alive. When Betty tried to wake him hours later, Bruce didn't move. Panic set in. She called for help, but by the time medics arrived, the most famous martial artist in the world was gone at just 32. It was a death so sudden, so confusing, it sent shockwaves across the globe. But the scandal didn't end with the tragedy. It was only beginning. Raymond Chow, desperate to control the narrative, quickly released a statement that Bruce had died at home with his wife Linda. The truth, that he had taken his last breath in his mistress's bed, was considered far too explosive to share with the world. But secrets like that don't stay buried for long. Within days, rumors swirled, reporters dug deeper, and Betty Ting Pei's name was forever tied to the death of Bruce Lee. Some tabloids went even further, spinning the story into a full-blown conspiracy. They accused Betty of poisoning Bruce, of intentionally giving him the pill that killed him. Others painted her as a femme fatale who lured him into destruction. Betty, however, told a very different story. Years later, she described Bruce as the first man she truly respected, the first person who made her understand what love could be. In her words, their relationship wasn't some shallow fling. It was real, it mattered, and it left her with scars she carried long after his death. Bruce himself had apparently seen things differently. According to the biography Bruce Lee, A Life, he once brushed off the affair as nothing more than a distraction. He allegedly confided to a friend that Betty didn't mean anything and that there were plenty of girls. But whether it was a fling to him or love to her, the fact remains, she was there at the end. She was the last person to see Bruce Lee alive. Betty Ting Pei's career, once promising, was overshadowed by that single detail. Decades later, when her name comes up, it's rarely about the film she made, but about the man she lost and the scandal she could never outrun. The mistress, the pill, the bed, the dragon's final breath. It's the kind of story that Hollywood could never have written better. Conspiracies about Bruce Lee's death. Bruce Lee's death was always going to spark questions. How could a man who looked like the very definition of health-cut, strong, and unstoppable drop dead at just 32? The official autopsy said his brain had swollen by 13%, a lethal surge of pressure caused by a bad reaction to medication. But for many, that explanation never made sense, not for someone like Bruce Lee. And so, almost instantly, the conspiracies began. The mystery took on a life of its own because of the cover-up. Producer Raymond Chow, desperate to protect Bruce's image, told the world that Lee had died at home with his wife, Linda. But that wasn't true. Within days, reporters discovered he had died in the apartment of another woman, actress Betty Ting Pei, the mistress nobody was supposed to know about. Chow's lie didn't just unravel, it fueled the fire. If he was hiding that, then what else was he hiding? From that moment on, the whispers got darker. Some said Betty was more than just a lover, that she was the one who slipped Bruce the pill that killed him. People speculated that Bruce had wanted to end the affair, and in a jealous rage, Betty got revenge. Others took it even further. painting their final night together as a drug-fueled orgy gone wrong. Betty, barely 26 at the time, was suddenly enemy number one. Years later, she revealed she had received death threats and lived in constant fear. "I was only 26 and was so afraid of death at that time. Nobody came to help me," she admitted. For many angry fans, she would always be the woman who killed the dragon. Then came the drug theories. Everyone knew Bruce used marijuana. It was found in his system during the autopsy. Some even speculated that he had gone further, dabbling in cocaine or LSD, based on letters that surfaced years later. But the experts dismissed the idea. The forensic scientist who examined his body flatly said blaming marijuana was irresponsible and irrational. Still, the rumors stuck. People couldn't believe that something as simple as a painkiller could wipe out a man like Bruce Lee. If it wasn't Betty, and it wasn't drugs, maybe it was the triads. That was the next conspiracy. Bruce had made enemies in Hong Kong. As a teenager, he had gotten into street fights, one of which allegedly involved the son of a local gang leader. Later, as a superstar, he supposedly refused to pay protection money on his film sets, a bold move in a city where gangs controlled everything. Some claimed that by standing his ground, he signed his own death warrant. Others twisted the theory even more, suggesting mainland Chinese gangs wanted him out of the way because his Cantonese language films threatened the dominance of Mandarin cinema. The idea was simple. Bruce Lee wasn't just too fast for his opponents, he was too dangerous for the business. But the conspiracies didn't stop there. Even Raymond Chow himself, the man who discovered Bruce, came under suspicion. Chow wasn't just a producer, he was Bruce's business partner in Concord Production Inc. Together they had made films like Way of the Dragon and Enter the Dragon, but their relationship was reportedly rocky. Some said that Chow wanted full control, and with Bruce eyeing Hollywood and bigger paydays, eliminating him was the easiest way to secure both money and rights. In the end, Chow certainly benefited. He gained control of Concord and later released Game of Death using just 11 minutes of footage Bruce had filmed, filling in the rest with stand-ins and even showing real footage of Bruce's funeral. To fans, it looked like exploitation at its coldest, which only added to the suspicion. Then there were the theories that stepped completely into the realm of legend. One of the most famous was that Bruce had been struck by Dim Mak, the touch of death. According to this theory, traditional kung fu masters were furious that Bruce was teaching Chinese techniques to outsiders. He had already fought a secret duel with Wong Jackman years earlier over this very issue. When he continued teaching foreigners, some believed he was marked for death. The idea was that a rival master used a secret pressure point strike that delayed its effects until that July day in 1973. Outlandish? Absolutely. But to believers, it explained what science couldn't. And then perhaps the wildest theory of all, the curse. Some fans pointed to the fact that Bruce's parents had lost another son before his birth, and superstitious whispers claimed the family was cursed. His nickname at home was Little Phoenix, a name usually given to girls, supposedly to trick spirits into sparing him. But the curse, believers argued, came back with full force. They tied it to the shocking death of Bruce's son, Brandon Lee, who was killed at just 28 in a freak accident on the set of The Crow, shot by a prop gun in a scene eerily similar to a sequence in Game of Death. For those who believed, it wasn't coincidence. It was fate. Of course, the truth is far less dramatic. Science points to an allergic reaction, a tragic twist of biology. No triads, no assassins, no curses. But try telling that to the millions who still refuse to accept it. For them, the mystery is part of the myth. Bruce Lee didn't just die, he ascended, leaving behind a story so full of questions and shadows that people will never stop speculating. His wife Linda always pushed back on the theories. She preferred to strip away the noise and remember the man, not the conspiracies. All these years later, people still wonder about how Bruce died, she once said. I prefer to remember how he lived, and maybe that's the real truth. Bruce Lee's death might be a puzzle, but his life, his speed, his power, and his philosophy were unforgettable. And no conspiracy, no rumor, no curse will ever take that away. At 79, Bolo Yeung exposes the truth about Bruce Lee's death. For decades, Bruce Lee's name has carried the weight of both myth and mystery. His life was meteoric, his death heartbreaking, and his legend untouchable. But behind all the headlines, behind the endless theories, there were people who truly knew him, friends who saw Bruce not as a symbol, but as a man. One of those friends was Bolo Yeung, the towering martial artist who shared the screen with him in the 1973 classic Enter the Dragon. And now, at 79, Bolo has finally begun to peel back the curtain on their bond, giving us a glimpse of Bruce Lee not just as the little dragon, but as a friend, a teacher, and an innovator. Bolo Yeung's journey into Bruce's orbit didn't start in Hollywood, but in Guangzhou, China, where he was born Yang Se in 1946. By the age of 10, he was already throwing himself into martial arts, and soon bodybuilding followed. His size, power, and discipline set him apart, and by his 20s he was a fixture on the bodybuilding circuit. He won the title of Mr. Hong Kong 10 years in a row, cementing his status as one of the most impressive physiques of his time. That body opened doors to cinema, but it was his presence, the intensity in his stare, and the aura of danger that made directors cast him as the villain again and again. It was during a Winston cigarette commercial in 1971 that fate intervened. Bruce Lee was on set, already rising fast as a star and cultural force. Instead of seeing Bolo as just another muscle-bound extra, Bruce noticed something more. He saw charisma. He saw intensity. He saw someone who could match him beat for beat on screen. That chance meeting turned into an unlikely friendship, and soon Bruce personally invited Bolo to join him in Enter the Dragon. For Bolo, the offer wasn't just a role. It was a life-changing opportunity. On set, they weren't just co-stars running through fight choreography. They were sparring partners, collaborators, and equals pushing each other to new limits. Bolo would later recall that Bruce was never still, never satisfied with what he already knew. He described him as always learning, always experimenting, always changing. That restless drive was what set Bruce apart, and standing beside him, Bolo absorbed every ounce of it. Their friendship went beyond the film. Bruce's respect for Bolo was genuine, and Bolo in turn treasured the bond. His home still holds mementos of their time together: a barbell from Bruce's personal gym, a Concord production business card, and pieces of history that carry the weight of their friendship. Whenever asked, Bolo speaks of Bruce with reverence, calling it an honor to have known him. He once admitted, "There will never be another Bruce Lee. I am privileged to have had the honor of calling him my friend." After Bruce's shocking death in 1973, Bolo carried the torch in his own way. He cemented his own legacy with unforgettable roles, most famously as Chong Li in Bloodsport, alongside Jean-Claude Van Damme, a performance that made him a legend in his own right. But no matter how many villains he played, no matter how many audiences he thrilled, Bolo always circled back to Bruce, the man who saw more in him than just muscle and menace. Today, as Bolo enjoys a quieter life in California, his influence continues through his son David, who trains MMA fighters and carries forward the family's martial tradition. Yet when fans ask Bolo about his career, the conversation always seems to drift back to Bruce. Because while Bolo Yeung built his own name, his story will forever be intertwined with the Little Dragons. In the end, Bolo's memories remind us that Bruce Lee's greatest impact wasn't just on film or martial arts, it was on the people he touched. Do you think Bruce Lee would have invented a new philosophy like Jeet Kune Do if he were still alive? Share your thoughts with us in the comments below. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Also click the next video shown on your screen. You will enjoy it.